Welcome, there's my voice. Welcome to Pacific Unitarian Church. My name is Darcy Carroll, and I'm your worship associate for today. We also welcome our online viewers at home. We come here to be our better selves. This is a place where we can join in having different beliefs, different lifestyles, different sexual orientations, gender identities, so many different things. We come here to be our better selves. What good would a church be if you came here and it didn't make you better? We always like to remember that we're on Tongva land. Tongva tribe are an indigenous tribe going back to the 1600s, and most all of Los Angeles was Tongva land, 4,000 square miles. We have a lovely lunch happening after church, as we always do. And if it's your first time here, anyone, then lunch is on us. For children, after the story of all ages in the service, which, at Lisa Seitz is doing today, they can follow on out to the classrooms for religious education. And we also have daycare available for the little people, the little ones. So, some announcements. Today there's a new members class right after the service, and that's right here in the hall. And from the Ministerial Search Committee, two things. One, a reminder about this survey, which is closing on October the 15th. So we would appreciate it if anybody who hasn't taken it yet would do so. And if you just really don't like computers, or you just don't want to do it on the computer, then Leanne over here has some paper ones. So let her see Leanne if you want to fill out a paper one. Yeah. Any takers? And speaking of the Ministerial Search Committee, next Sunday, they're going to be presenting kind of a Minister Search 101 with Chloe and the team. And they'll just explain everything about the process, and it's interesting, and it's kind of amazing, and there's a lot to it. So that's next Sunday after church, and it's going to repeat on Zoom on Monday night at 6 or 7?
Monday at...
Well, we'll let you know. You'll get an email. Next Sunday, the 22nd, not next Sunday, 2 Sundays from now, on the 22nd, we're going to have the future of racial justice at PUC. It's called Where Do We Go From Here? So that's right after church on the 22nd. And lastly, the food ministry is putting on a potluck, and that's going to be October 29th. So if you want to share a dish, if there's a dish you really like to make, maybe make it for about 15 people or something, and let Andy Kistner know. And I think that's it. So now we'll do the chalice lighting.
Thank you, Darcy. And it is 7 on Monday, the 16th. So if you want to come learn about search with me and the Ministerial Search Committee, 7 p.m. And we go into our chalice lighting. Our chalice lighting this morning is from Adrian Graham. We kindle a flame of power, illuminating the holy in each of our faces. We recognize in the flame a passionate commitment to our shared faith. We are held and carried from day to day, week to week, in the shining of the light. This flame is mine as well as yours. We are brought together on this day, called to growth, to expansion within its glow. What does your heart know while beholding this holy fire? What does your heart know while beholding this holy fire? Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is the Reverend Chloe Briede, and I'm happy to be here with you at Pacific Unitarian Church this morning. It's nice to see you all on this sort of hot and foggy morning. It was foggy this morning, right? The Oglala Sioux chief, Luther Standing Bear, was a noble activist in the early 1900s for the protection of Native American heritage, rights, and sovereignty. He shared this on the practice of pause and silence. Conversation was never began at once, nor in a hurried manner. No one was quick with an answer, no matter how important, and no one was pressed for an answer. A pause giving time for thought was the truly courteous and courageous way of beginning and conducting a conversation. Silence was meaningful with the Lakota, and his granting a space of silence was to the speechmaker and his own moment of silence before talking was done in the practice of true politeness in regard for the rule that thought comes before speech. Thought comes before speech. So in this spirit of thought before speech, a truly courteous and courageous way of beginning, we take a moment of silence to open our worship on this Sunday of Indigenous Peoples Day. Thought comes before speech. You're invited to rise as you're willing and able for number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth.
Over Okay, we have a very wonderful little group here today. Okay, like the song that we just sung, we have a lot to be grateful for, right? Well, this is a story about a group of people, indigenous people, that came together and created a confederation. That means a group, much like we have states, okay? And they created a great confederacy. And this is how you pronounce what we're talking about today. Haudenosaunee. Can you say that? Haudenosaunee. And it means people of the longhouse. So these were the people that got together and created this. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also referred to as the Iroquois Confederacy, was formed about 900 CE, long time ago. Haudenosaunee means people of the longhouse. Its original 5-member nations included the Mohawk. Have you heard of them before? Some indigenous tribes. The Oneida, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, and the Seneca. They're all located in what is today called New York and Ontario. So can you make a picture in your mind of the United States? It's up in that left-hand corner, or right-hand corner for you guys. The nations had been at war with each other for many years until a stranger from the Huron nation arrived with a message of peace, and his name was Hiawatha. Have you ever heard that name before? There's a whole song and a poem about Hiawatha the peacemaker. It took many trips and the support of clan mothers and respected warriors from all 5 nations to accept his teachings. He is so revered today that this leader is only referred to as the Great Peacemaker, not by the name given at birth. The 5 nations, joined much later by the Tuscarora Nation, lived under the Great Law of Peace for many centuries. And one thing that's really interesting, when you think about our country, what are we made of? The United States, that's right. You know where we got that idea? From the Iroquois Nation. I did not know that before. So one of the things that they did is they decided that instead of pledging to their country or pledging to a leader, they would give Thanksgiving addresses every day. And they would greet the new day with all these Thanksgiving blessings. So you know the song that we heard before, they talked about loving all of the things in the earth and that we get from people and all the great things that we have. So Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address is greetings to the natural world. Now there was a young woman like 13, 14 years old, and she was an indigenous child. And she called herself Indian, so I'm going to feel comfortable calling her Indian as well. She was every day, they got up and they said the Pledge of Allegiance. La, 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 la. And every day she sat down and thought, are we really equal? Do you think everybody in the United States is equal? Really? When we get down to the way we treat people? So she got more and more upset about saying the Pledge of Allegiance because she says, Mom, I'm lying. Not everybody is treated the same. So her mom introduced her to the Thanksgiving address, and that made a lot more sense to her because the things that they prayed about or gave thanks for were the people. Today we gathered and we see the cycles of life continue, and so then they had a little bit more. It's really long, so we won't talk about all of it. Now our minds are one. The Earth Mother. We are all thankful to our Mother, the Earth, for she gives us all that we need. Now our minds are one. The waters. We give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. Now our minds are one. The fish. We turn our minds to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water, and they also give themselves to us for food. Now we are one. Good job. The plants. Now we turn toward the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. Now we are one. Good job. Got my papers too far under. The food plants. With one mind, we turn to honor and thank all the food plants from the garden. Now we are one. The medicine herbs, we turn to all the medicine herbs of the world. And from the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. Now our minds are one. The animals, we gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animals of the world. They have many things to teach us as people. Now our minds are one. The trees, we now turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Now our minds are one. The birds, these are my favorites. We put our minds together as one and thank all the birds who move and fly about over our heads. Now our minds are one. It's a long one, isn't it? The four winds. We are all thankful to the powers we know as the four winds, and we hear their voices in the moving as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. And now our minds are one. These are our closing words. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. For all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in their own way. And now our minds are one. And there was a little boy, and that's much longer than I read. He said, "Oh, this is so long, it's so long. Why do we have to read this every day?" And his mother said, "Oh, poor you. You have so many things to be grateful for." So I hope that gave you some thoughts about what you want to be grateful for. All right, good job. Thank you.
Sing to the power of the faith within. Sing to the power of the faith within. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the faith within.
Now's when you have an opportunity, if you want to come up and share a joy or a sorrow or a concern and light a candle, or if you want to just light a candle and not say anything, that's an option too. And it's kind of amazing how much sharing one of these things makes your heart feel better. for all those unspoken joys or concerns.
If you would join me in the spirit of prayer with this prayer from Lilwat tribe member Mike Adams. We'll take a deep breath together before we start. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out, settling into this moment of prayer. For the generations who survived being hunted, who endured the theft and destruction of their people's land, and who persevered through the theft and indoctrination of our children, we are grateful that you survived and for the resilience you have passed on to us. Because you did these things, we are still here. For activists who stood against corruption, who forced a spotlight onto our people's mistreatment, we are grateful for your commitment. Because of it, we are still here. For people who never consented to the sacrifices that were forced from you, we remember you, we mourn your suffering and loss, we honor you as best we can. We do this because we are still here. For the future generations, we ask that you remember. We look to you to keep our people's future alive after we're gone. We ask you to find strength in your ancestors and use the resilience of your people to create your future and that of your children. We ask you to ensure that when we are gone, through you, we are still here. We pray this with gratitude, mourning, honor, remembrance, and strength on the weekend of Indigenous Peoples' Day. Gratitude, mourning, honor, remembrance, and strength. May it be so. Amen. Our reading today is from Randy Woodley and his book, Becoming Rooted, 100 Days of Reconnecting with Sacred Earth. He says this: awareness is always a difficult task. We go about our lives taking in information and listening to experiences that align with our own worldviews. We readily accept myths that prop up our perceptions of ourselves as the good guys to disrupt our stability, which social scientists call homeostasis, means to go against our own natural tendencies to be safe and to secure our own future, to disrupt homeostasis. When we finally muster the courage to make ourselves aware of the truth, we may find it to be different from our original understanding and difficult to swallow. When we are faced with the dilemma that our opinion does not reconcile with the truth, what do we do? A worldview based on Platonic dualism, the Western worldview, equates simple knowledge with experience. In the Westerner worldview, to know is to do. The problem is that knowing is just partial reality. In other words, to know without doing is a false reality. As part of an experiment, I sometimes ask several Native American elders what they believe. Their response is always the same. They tell me that they do. There is no space between knowing and doing in an indigenous worldview. They are the same. What will we do with the knowledge we gain? How does knowing about injustice change us? How does it change the stories we tell about ourselves and our nation? If an American touts the idea of democracy, equity, and inalienable rights, especially if they claim the United States to be a model for the rest of the world, they must deal honestly with the real history and with the actions against America's indigenous people. If America is ever to escape from supreme hypocrisy, the claim of freedom for all must deal with the way freedom was taken away from Native Americans. He finishes, unresolved knowledge of injustice is useless unless it is applied in some good way towards those who experienced it. Our centering hymn this morning is number 83, Winds Be Still. The end of the Civil War spurred expansion. A nation licking its wounds was looking westward, seeking to civilize lands it had earlier regarded as uncivilized. The system of creating reservations for Native Americans had started about 15 years earlier. During this time, the good liberal Christian thing to do was to work on two causes: the now free blacks in the South and the Native Americans, the so-called Indian problem. In 1886, in that vein, the Unitarians established the Committee of Southern and Indian Education and Work. I'm drawing from a paper by the Reverend Dana Strivers here. The committee had the dual goals of providing aid to established Southern schools and founding Unitarian-run industrial schools for Indians. Committee members viewed American Indians as uncivilized and uneducated and saw their work as a form of social justice that would help Native American communities. At the same time, the group was motivated by a concern that the Unitarian denomination was not doing as much for Native communities in comparison to other denominations. The bigger denominations were already, through partial government funding and urging, establishing schools and other ways of helping. The news in recent years about church-run schools in Canada and here in the US likely means that you all have some idea of what I'm talking about. Schools ranged from unhelpful to downright abusive. We were motivated to look west with the rest of the nation with some very misguided ideas of service and also misplaced competitiveness. Perhaps believing that we should keep up with the Joneses even if we were and still are a very small denomination, much smaller than the Catholics or the Methodists. An American Unitarian report at the time said this: "We have always maintained that we are to strive not so much to save human beings from future pain and loss as to make them now and here fit to do life's duties well. Yet it has happened, especially in respect to Indian education, that from causes largely beyond our control, we have done little or nothing, while other religious bodies, planning wisely and giving liberally, have established schools that are replacing savagery by civilization." It goes on, "For not only humanity and religion, but true patriotism, demand that we should do our part to dispel the darkness and banish the barbarism, which are the twin foes of the nation's best life." This was their motivation. In addition to hurtful language about Native people in comparison to others, I was also struck by the patriotism of this statement. Did you guys notice that? The nation's best life is how it ends their aim. Something we don't tend to espouse much today. Thus, the Unitarians set out to establish their own industrial school. They decided to send the Reverend Henry F. Bond and his wife Pamela westward from their nice home in Massachusetts in search of a location for an industrial school for Native Americans. They started with the Ute, a tribe in Colorado, which the Unitarians had overseen before, but were outbid for that school by the Methodists. They subsequently moved on to Montana and established the Montana Industrial School for Indians at Ramona Ranch on Crow land. While the school was only open from 1887 to 1895, a whole 8 years, it suffered from constant difficulties. These ranged from the measles being widespread at the school to hunger to students running away because of homesickness. The general in charge of the Crow Reservation when the school opened had a policy of withholding food rations in order to motivate families to send their children to the school. They later withdrew that policy, citing that it wasn't in fact helping recruitment, and even motivated students to not return from holiday break. The curriculum at the school included sewing and business and English and agriculture and religion. They had the students celebrating Christian holidays, reading the Bible, and attending services. A small meal was provided to those who attended services, an important motivator in a place rife with food insecurity. During the 8 years, the school had different administrators with various ways of doing things. One required students to only speak English, and though he also banned intoxicated adults from coming onto campus. In 1895, the federal government decided not to renew its grant to the American Unitarian Association, and a lack of funding forced Unitarians to cease running it, handing control of the school back to the federal government. The school closed 2 years later. I hadn't heard this history until very recently. It was doing research for this sermon, in fact. There was an academic paper by Dana Shriver that was published only, I think, maybe 5 or 7 years ago. So it's very recent history. It's very recently that we're learning about this history. And I'm curious if anybody else knew about it. No? Okay. Yeah, see? It's my understanding that our Universalist ancestors, on the other hand, didn't have any schools during this time period, probably because they were even smaller and even poorer than the Unitarians. The Unitarians were sort of the rich denomination, rich intellectual denomination, and the Universalists tended to be poorer, smaller, less organized. So why do I bring this up on this Sunday before Indigenous Peoples Day? Activist, scholar, and minister Randy Woodley, a person of Cherokee descent, said this in our reading. If any American touts the idea of democracy, equity, and inalienable rights, especially if they claim the United States to be a model for the rest of the world, they must deal honestly with real history and with the actions against America's indigenous people. If America is ever to escape from supreme hypocrisy, the claim of freedom for all must deal with the way freedom has been taken away from Native Americans. Our denomination, our Unitarian ancestors that we take such pride in, were a part of taking away the freedom of Native Americans. James Baldwin says this: history is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history. Beloveds, if we are our history, if history still reverberates in us and our denomination, what does that mean? Woodley asks us to take a nuanced view of things, acknowledging that despite our ideals, we have done harm. And I know this personally in my own family. I've been told humorous and proud stories of my ancestors, probably like a lot of you. One of my ancestors, my Norwegian great-grandfather, was a gaucho in Central America and subsequently managed a fruit plantation for Chiquita Banana or United Fruit Company in Cuba. Much of what I heard about that were the stories of my grandmother growing up in Cuba, her pride and love of the country and her closeness to the maid that raised her. My family never talked about what it meant to be a plantation manager or what life was truly like for everyone there. Partially because I was too young to ask and maybe to hear what they were going to say, and likely because, like us Unitarians, we wanted to believe we were one of the good guys. I still have a lot to learn about what Chiquita did in Cuba. I'll be honest and say part of me is scared to know. At the same time, I should learn it. Pride without the full truth can be dangerous, especially my family's history with such a reckless and ruthless and exploitative company. Our history is important because we need to not repeat it. A couple of weeks ago, I preached on forgiveness and guilt. This is applicable here. To not repeat it, we need to acknowledge it, make amends if we can, and work for a better, changed future. The history of the Montana school is available to us because Marjorie Peace, a member of the Crow Nation, who is also Unitarian, self-published a history. One of her ancestors was one of the early Crow staff members in that school's history. In 1986, she and her husband organized a centennial commemoration, which descendants of the school attended, as well as the then UUA president, Bill Schultz. I don't know if we ever apologized to the Crow for the role of the school in the erasure of their culture. In 2009, the UUA did formally apologize to the Northern Ute in Utah. The tribe that the Unitarians had been sent to govern in the 1870s, like many other Protestant denominations during the creation of the reservation system. And here's what's written about General Assembly that year when the apology was given. Unitarian Universalist Association President Reverend William Sinkford spoke about the relationship between Unitarians and Universalists and the Utes, a Native American people living in Utah. Here is the short version of the story, Sinkford says. After the Civil War, the Union Army was deployed to take lands from the Native people living on the Great Plains. These Native people were herded onto reservations administered by government agencies. But in 1870, President Ulysses S. Grant asked Protestant denominations to take over the administration of various Indian reservations. The American Unitarian Association accepted responsibility for the Northern Ute people. The denominations were supposed to civilize the Utes. Today, we would call this cultural imperialism, said Sinkford, the act of forcing the Utes to give up their culture and take on a new culture. The results were tragic, he continued, saying the efforts brought wretchedness and destitution to the Utes. Our Unitarian ministers did defend the Indians and urge the government not to allow whites to make war on them. But in general, the Unitarians did not have a positive effect on the Utes. Sinkford goes on, I'm still learning about this part of history, and I'm painfully aware that only white voices are represented here. He was talking about General Assembly. Based on what I've learned, the Unitarian agents do not seem to have been very effective. Perhaps as a result, they did less damage than some of the more successful denominations. Utes now are writing their own history. This is Sinkford again. Consider these thoughts as a work in progress, because I don't claim to have this completely figured out. What I believe is that reconciliation begins with truth-telling, with knowing and telling the stories. Reconciliation begins with confessions on both sides. Sinkford goes on to offer an apology to the Ute people, saying, and so to the Ute people, the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations offers our heartfelt apology. We participated, however ineptly, in a process that stole your land and forced a foreign way of life on you. We ask for your forgiveness and promise to stand with you as you chart your way forward. Forrest Cush, a member of the Ute Nation, rose to respond to Sinkford's remark. He began by saying that he spoke as an individual, not as the Ute Nation as a whole. And then he said, I accept your apology. Details are still fragmented and may forever be when it comes to the history of our denomination and its involvement in various good and bad causes over our history. One of our own members has brought to my attention a famous Unitarian, Horace Davis's involvement in the Chinese Exclusion Act and his contributions to the endowment of Star King School for the Ministry. There's still a lot of work to do, histories to still unravel, apologies to make, relationships to rebuild. For those who are interested in learning our history and joining that project and learning and doing something, I invite you to read the paper about the Montana Industrial School. Learn more about our denomination, even the bad parts and the mistakes. I will be including it in this week's e-blast, so you can take a look at that paper. Thank you for the thumbs up. Our institutions are not perfect. We are not perfect. May we acknowledge the past and work towards change for a brighter, more equal future. Amen.
It's a split plate today. So let me tell you why. This Sunday that we share the plate with the Gabrielino San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, also known as the Gabrielino Tongva, which is historically the traditional tribe within Los Angeles. It's their vision to build and inspire traditional values and ethics for future generations while preserving the foundations of American Indian culture. Saving and preserving traditional culture is a priority of this tribe, along with developing unity among nations, and then with non-native citizens by educational work and providing an awareness of the history and the culture of the people, of their people. So please give generously. So beautiful, Severin. I asked him what that was before, in case you're wondering, too. It's Turandot by Puccini, which was, I think, used in a lot of old movies, old classic movies, but it kind of makes me want to cry. Okay. Would you please join me in our affirmation of gratitude? Let us be grateful when we are able to give, for many do not have that privilege. Let us be grateful for all those who share their gifts, for we are enriched by their giving. And let us also be grateful even for our needs, so that we may experience the generosity of others. And now our closing hymn is We Are.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences, beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together. In spite of time and death and the space between the stars, we pause in silent witness to that unity.
May the blessing of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you. May love's presence illuminate your hearts, now and forevermore. So be it. Amen, shalom, salam, namaste, and blessed be.